Hi, this is Naturalist Shannon Pennington with the Warren County Park District in Southwest Ohio. Welcome to Discovering Nature in Your Own Backyard, a new YouTube series. Today we will be focusing on reptiles and amphibians. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources at ohiodnr.gov is a wonderful resource for information. They offer free field guides available either in PDF format or in hard copy. There's a link at the top, or you can Google ohiodnr.gov and look for field guides. I'd like to give a special thank you to Dave Ware. Dave is an Ohio certified volunteer naturalist and a friend of Warren County Park District. He's an amateur photographer with an extensive collection of more than 5,000 nature photos in his Flickr album, and he has graciously given me permission to use his work to help others learn. Most of the images I'm using today are his. In today's program, we are going to be learning about reptiles and amphibians, or reps and amps. What makes a reptile and an amphibian an amphibian? Ohio's reptiles, including turtles, snakes, and lizards. Ohio's amphibians, including frogs, toads, salamanders, and newts. What to do if you find a turtle crossing the road or in your yard. How to tell Ohio's venomous snakes from non-venomous ones, and why you don't need to fear either. And how you can help. First, let's take a look at the animals on this page. Are they reptiles or not? And how do you know? We have a cobra, fox, fish, turtle, duck, seahorse, rattlesnake, mosquito, frog, chameleon, raptor, and crocodile. Reptiles are ectothermic, or cold-blooded. That means that they do not have fur, feathers, or sweat glands. They rely on the outside temperature to help their body determine how warm or cold, and therefore how active they can be. This eliminates our fox, duck, and raptor. They are not reptiles. Reptiles are vertebrates. That means that they have a backbone. This would eliminate our mosquito or any other insects. Insects are not reptiles. Reptiles have scales, bony plates called scutes, or both. This means our fox, duck, mosquito, frog, and raptor are not reptiles. Reptiles breathe air with lungs. This would eliminate our fish and seahorse, as well as our mosquito. They are not reptiles. Reptiles do not have a larval stage. They're born on land, and they look like mini adults right from the start. This eliminates our fox, fish, duck, seahorse, mosquito, frog, and raptor. So based on those previous guidelines, the following are not reptiles: foxes, fish, ducks, seahorses, mosquitoes, frogs, and raptors, not reptiles. And which ones are? That leaves us with our snakes, turtles, lizards, and crocodiles. Here are some fun facts about reptiles. They first appeared in the fossil record during the Mesozoic era. So we have fossil evidence in the form of a skeleton from Scotland 340 million years ago. Here in the United States, we also have fossilized tracks of a reptile. Those were found in the Grand Canyon, and they have been dated to 310 million years ago. Reptiles evolved from amphibians, and they're closely related to birds. There are approximately 10,450 species of reptiles worldwide on all the continents except for Antarctica. And there are 47 species native to Ohio. There are 4 orders of reptiles. The ones that will appear in bold on your screen are present in Ohio. First, we have the crocodilia, which encompass the crocodiles, gharials, caimans, and alligators. Of course, we don't have those here in the Buckeye State. Next, we have the spinodontia, the tuataras. There's only one species left of these, and they're located in New Zealand, so we don't have those here either. They are actually very closely related to dinosaurs. Third, we have the testudines, the turtles and tortoises. We do have turtles in Ohio. And finally, the squamata, the snakes, lizards, and amphibians, or worm lizards. We do have snakes and lizards here. Let's begin with the testudines, the turtles and tortoises. There are approximately 350 species worldwide. 11 of those are found in Ohio. And what's in a name? What's the difference between a turtle, a terrapin, and a tortoise? Well, it depends where in the world you are. In England, turtles swim, but tortoises don't. In Australia, if it's not a sea turtle, it's considered a tortoise. To most scientists, tortoises are land creatures, turtles are aquatic, and terrapins are semi-aquatic and like marshy water. For North Americans, we consider turtles to be everything. It's an umbrella term that encompasses all turtles, terrapins, and tortoises. Clear as mud, right? Depending on the species, turtles can be carnivores, herbivores, or omnivores. Some turtles can eat poisonous mushrooms and even jellyfish. Turtles do not have teeth. Their beaks are made of keratin. Sometimes their beaks are serrated. They also can often have special adaptations. Let's take a closer look at the pictures on the screen. On the bottom left, we have a Galapagos tortoise. Look at the serrations on this tortoise's beak. It's almost like a steak knife. In the middle, we have a leatherback sea turtle. Those protrusions inside of the sea turtle's mouth help it to grasp on and swallow fish. Finally, on the right, we have the alligator snapping turtle. Can you see that red worm-like thing in the picture? That is called a lure. It's actually part of the alligator snapping turtle's mouth. The turtle will open its mouth, wiggle the lure, and an unsuspecting fish will come in thinking it's going to get a meal. In actuality, it becomes the meal. The shell of a turtle is composed of 2 to 3 parts: the carapace, which is the top, the plastron, the bottom, and then there's usually a bridge that connects both of them together. Most turtle shells, like this box turtle picture on the left, are made of bone, cartilage, and keratin. Soft-shell turtles, however, are made of a leathery skin and oils. Take a look at the picture on the right. The shell is fully attached to the body. It's completely fused together. A turtle cannot take off its shell and walk away like they do in the cartoons. They're not like hermit crabs. Their shells are completely connected to their body, and as their bones grow, their shell grows too. Sometimes you might find turtles in your yard. You might find them basking near water. We have pictures of some Midland painted turtles on the left and a common snapping turtle on the right. Because they're cold-blooded, they like to get out of the water and absorb the sunshine on nice warm days. That helps their digestion speed up, it helps their respirations and their heart rate, and it allows them to process oxygen and food. You might find turtles in the woods or in your yard. On the left, we have a common or woodland box turtle, and on the right, that is a common snapping turtle hatchling. How cute is that? This is an example of how a reptile looks exactly like its adult form, even when it's brand new. It's just smaller. You might find turtles crossing the road. This is a common thing that we find in the springtime in particular. This is a picture of a box turtle. Why could a turtle be crossing a road? Well, there are a few possible reasons. It could be looking for a mate. It could be looking for a good spot to lay eggs, or it could be looking to expand its habitat. If you see a turtle in a spot where it should not be, what should you do? Well, you can help it to cross the road, and in doing so, you'll not only just save that individual turtle, you might help to save the species. Turtles reproduce at a very slow rate. They have to live a very long time and lay many eggs in order for a couple of babies to survive. So what should you do? First of all, stay safe. Never ever put yourself in danger. If you can stop safely, go ahead and do it and let the turtle cross. Don't turn it around because it'll just try and cross again. If you must move the turtle, lift it by the back of the shell, never by the tail. Remember, the tail is part of the turtle's skeleton, so you can actually break its back by picking it up by the tail. And don't move it to a new area. It's just going to roam around aimlessly or try and return to its home area. Turtles are very territorial. They really only move about a mile from their original location. So if you move them away from that spot, they're going to spend the rest of their lives looking around trying to get home. So of course, some turtles need some special treatment. The snapping turtles and the soft-shell turtles can be defensive or maybe extra bitey. You can use a stick or another long object to push it along, or you can hold a hind leg, support its tummy, and help it cross. So something that I like to remind people is to think of turtles kind of like old ladies. If you were to see an old lady who needed help crossing the road, what would you do? Would you help her safely cross the road, stopping traffic if necessary? Or would you put her in your car, drive her to the other side of town, and let her go because you think she'd like that better? Of course, you'd just help her cross the road. Think about turtles like you think about little old ladies who need help crossing the road. So there are some things to consider with turtle conservation. Threats include habitat destruction, light pollution, and vehicles. So we know that things are being built at rates all over the place. That means we're taking away the natural habitats of turtles. Turtles, especially sea turtles, rely on the cycles of the moon to lay their eggs and know where they're going. Light pollution can interfere with that. And of course, vehicle collisions are always a problem. If you do find an injured turtle, contact a permitted wildlife rehabilitator. It is illegal in most states to try and rehabilitate wildlife without a permit. So Google permitted wildlife rehabilitator. It's illegal to take animals from the wild and turn them into pets. So if you do find an animal in the woods or in your yard, remember that it belongs in the wild. There is an exception to this. Snapping turtles and soft-shell turtles are considered game animals in Ohio. You can harvest them with a fishing license. Next, let's take a look at the squamata. These are our snakes, lizards, and amphibians, or worm lizards. We do have snakes and lizards in Ohio. There are 7,900 species of squamata worldwide, and they make up 96% of reptiles. Ohio is home to 5 lizards and 26 snake species, so that's 31 of our 47 reptiles. If you are afraid of snakes, you're certainly not alone. Many people have what's known as ophidiophobia, including the very brave explorer and archaeologist Indiana Jones. This fictional character had no problem traveling to exotic lands in search of ancient artifacts, but snakes would completely paralyze him with fear. This is thought to be a natural evolutionary response to a perceived threat. Before humans had evolved to process rational thoughts, we used our reptilian or primal brains to help keep ourselves safe with knee-jerk impulses, like automatically staying away from dangerous things like snakes. As our brains developed and evolved, humans learned to rationalize. We now know that not all snakes are dangerous at all. In fact, very few of them have venom, and even fewer cause us pain or harm. Actually, snakes are essential in controlling the rodent population. Rodents can carry all kinds of diseases that are harmful to humans, and snakes keep those populations in check. Therefore, snakes are actually helpful to the human population. So next time you feel yourself being a little bit scared of snakes, try and calm down your own reptilian brain and remember that snakes are often just misunderstood. The longest snake in the world is the reticulated python, reaches about 30 feet. The heaviest snake in the world is the giant anaconda, reaching over 500 pounds. And the smallest snake in the world is the Barbados thread snake, pictured here on top of a quarter. It's only 4 inches long. There's a fossil snake in Colombia that was 42 feet long and an estimated 2,500 pounds. It lived around 60 million years ago. Thank goodness we don't have to worry about any of those here in Ohio. Here's a picture of an eastern milk snake. This is a snake that we have in Ohio, and it's a pretty typical specimen. Snakes do not have eyelids. Instead, they have a single transparent scale that covers their eyes. They have poor eyesight. You can often tell if a snake is getting ready to shed because its eyes will appear sort of milky. They can sense vibrations, but they don't have eardrums or external ears. They have forked tongues that are used for stereo smelling. So they'll flick out their tongues, pick up scent particles off the air, and bring them back into the mouth. They have a special organ called the Jacobson's organ on the roof of their mouth, and that helps them interpret the scents. They do not have taste buds. Some snakes have organs called pits. They're little slits, often on the front of their face. They detect minute changes in temperature. So examples of these would be pit vipers and some boas and pythons. So that helps them to find their prey. Their jaw bones can be disengaged. So rather than having a hinged jaw like we do, they can disengage that. And it's sort of connected by something sort of like a rubber band. So they can stretch their mouth really wide, allowing them to swallow things that are much larger than the original size of their mouth. They can even digest teeth. Their growth rate slows as the snakes age, but they never stop growing. They also will shed their skin as they grow. Let's take a closer look at venom versus poison. Venom is injected through a stinger or fangs. Poison, on the other hand, is ingested or eaten. Let's take a closer look at the eastern garter snake, one of the most common species that you might find in your yard in Ohio. Eastern garter snakes are mildly venomous. That means that they use a mild version of venom to inject into their prey and stun that animal. We're talking enough venom to stun a toad or another small animal, an earthworm, maybe a mouse. They're also mildly poisonous, meaning when they swallow the toads and the salamanders that have those toxins in their systems, the snake keeps those toxins in its system, making it poisonous to anything that might like to eat it. It's not enough poison to make us sick, probably not enough poison to even make your pet dog sick, but it's enough in there that might deter a smaller bird, for example. So the eastern garter snake, technically it's venomous, technically it's poisonous, but it's not dangerous to humans at all. Now let's take a closer look at non-venomous versus venomous snakes of Ohio. Remember, these are snakes that would inject a poison or a venom into your skin and would be dangerous enough to injure or even kill a human. So in the state of Ohio, when we're looking at non-venomous snakes, those guys usually have oval-shaped heads, round pupils, no pits on their face. Their underside of their tails have divided scales, and then the venomous snakes have a flatter, more triangular-shaped head, elliptical pupils. Sometimes they have pits on the front of their face, and if you were to pick it up and look at the underside of its tail, which of course I would not recommend, they have undivided scales. In Ohio, we have 3 species of venomous snakes, and I mean dangerous when I say venomous. So we learned just a minute ago that the eastern garter snake is technically venomous. What we're talking about here is enough venom to be dangerous to a person. Beware of mimicry, however. So a lot of non-venomous species, like our black rat snake, for example, will rattle its tail in dry leaves, copying the behavior of a rattlesnake, which might scare away a predator or trick a person who doesn't know any better. Similarly, a lot of non-venomous snakes can flatten their heads out, making them appear to be triangular. So if you're not sure what kind of snake you're looking at, the best thing to do is just keep your distance. Chances are it's probably not a dangerous snake, but of course you never want to take any chances. Let's take a look at those 3 venomous snakes that we do have in Ohio. The first one is the eastern copperhead. This is the one that does not have a rattle. You can identify it by that Hershey kiss looking pattern on its side. is actually fairly uncommon in Ohio, and its bite is rarely fatal. So let's take a look at the map on the right. This is from that reptile guide that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. The map shows the areas that are shaded in. That's where copperheads were found prior to 1976. The areas on the map that have dots are where they have been found after 1976, up to the current date. So of course, reptiles are not going to know the difference between one county line or another, so it's possible that one of the copperheads may have moved a little bit to the north, southwest, or east, but this is a general location of where you might find them. So think about where you are in the state of Ohio, find yourself on your map, and see if you're in one of those counties or a nearby surrounding county where copperheads have been documented by professional herpetologists. Are you likely to come across a copperhead in your yard? Probably not. Next, we'll take a look at the Massasauga rattlesnake. This is a swamp rattler, or sometimes called the black snapper. This is an endangered species in Ohio. They're sluggish, they rarely bite, and they're seldom fatal if they do bite. Again, let's take a look at the map. Notice the areas on the map that have those little dots. Again, think about where you are. Are you likely to come across a Massasauga rattlesnake in your county? Probably not. Remember, they're also endangered. Finally, we have the timber rattlesnake. Again, this is an endangered species in Ohio. It's the largest of our venomous snakes in Ohio. It can get to be 6 feet in length, but they're usually around 3 feet. These guys have a mild disposition. They can be aggressive, however, if provoked. Again, look at the map. Look where those dots are. Think about where you are. Think about where those animals have been documented by professional herpetologists after 1976. And remember that they're endangered. Are you likely to find a timber rattlesnake in your yard? Probably not. Finally, let's look at something that is not present in the state of Ohio. I hear reports every year of people seeing water moccasins or cottonmouths in Ohio. This is not a thing that we have to worry about, thank goodness. What people are actually seeing is the northern water snake. It's a case of mistaken identity. The cottonmouth and water moccasin does not come this far north. They do, however, look a lot like the northern water snake, which is a non-venomous species that is common in Ohio. If you take a look on the map, that's the range of cottonmouths in the United States. They don't come this far north. And then take a look at the picture on the right. If you do not have a trained eye, those species may look identical to you. However, there are some very distinctive differences. The easiest way I've found to tell a northern water snake from anything else is that northern water snakes on their bottom jaw have what look like braces almost. They have lines, vertical lines that go on their jaw. And no other snake in Ohio has that. So if you see a snake that has a jaw, the bottom jaw with lines on it, probably looking at a water snake. So where are you likely to find snakes in Ohio? Well, you may find them in or near the water. If you go kayaking or canoeing or fishing, you may see water snakes in particular. These are both examples of northern water snakes. One of them is swimming, one of them is basking in the sun. You may find snakes crossing the road, like this gray rat snake in the picture. This is a very typical posture for a gray rat snake. Look how it's kind of kinky looking. Almost looks like it's like vibrating or something. That's very typical for a rat snake. So this guy is probably just hanging out on the pavement because it's nice and warm. You might also find snakes in your yard. This is a pretty common occurrence. We have our garter snake friend on the left again, and a Decay's brown snake on the right. Check out what they're using as cover. They like low to the ground areas, dried grasses, leaves that had fallen, piles of brush. I've found them before when I've left mulch laying out and I've picked up the bag of mulch and they've been underneath that. Areas like that where it's going to be dark and quiet, protected from other things, that's where you might find snakes. Now remember, our garter snake on the left, slightly venomous, slightly poisonous, but not dangerous. Our snake on the right, DeKay's brown snake, also not dangerous. Next, we're going to focus on lizards. Lizards are different from snakes in that they usually have 4 legs. Their toes have claws on them, they have external ear openings, and movable eyelids. Most lizards can drop their tails when they're threatened. This is called caudal autonomy. So they can drop their tail, and the tail will actually continue to flop around and move, which is a distraction to an animal that might be trying to make a meal out of the lizard. The lizard can then run away, and eventually it will grow a new tail, although it will never be quite as long and beautiful as the initial one. Ohio's 5 species of lizards are all considered insectivores. They're beneficial animals that eat insects. There are also legless lizards. These are our amphibians in the squamata order. So our legless lizards look like snakes, but they're not snakes. Remember, we learned that snakes cannot blink? Lizards can. Snakes do not have external ear openings. Lizards do. So these animals, although they look like snakes, can blink their eyes and they have ear holes. That's what differentiates them from snakes, and that's how you would know if it is a legless lizard. One of the most common species that you may find of a lizard in Ohio is the common 5-lined skink. It's very widespread. The picture on the left is a juvenile. It has a blue tail when they're young. As they get older, that blue tail fades. You can find them under the bark of decaying logs and in wood piles and on tree stumps. They like to hang out where there are woods. Next, let's take a look at the Lazarus lizard. This lizard can only be found in southwest Ohio in Hamilton, Butler, and Claremont counties. This species was brought here by a little boy, George Rao, age 10, from Italy in 1951. Legend says that he put 6 to 10 of them in a sock and brought them on a plane ride home and then released them in his yard near Hyde Park. They have since reproduced and reproduced and reproduced, and because the habitat here is very similar to that of Milan, where they originated, their population has exploded. We don't have the predators that they do in Milan, so this lizard has become kind of a problem here. They're considered an invasive species. There are millions and millions of them in southwest Ohio now. Their population densities can be up to 1,500 per acre in a good habitat. If you ever go down to Hyde Park or Mount Adams, even if you visit the Cincinnati Zoo, you may find some of these Lazarus lizards. The reason they're called Lazarus lizards is because little George Rao was the stepson of the gentleman who owned the Lazarus department stores. Indiana has this problem as well, and they actually have eradication efforts underway. Since they are considered an invasive species, that's one that doesn't belong here, and it has kind of taken over without any checks or balances. That is something that can be a problem for the native species. Currently in Ohio, we do not have any eradication efforts underway that I'm aware of. So you may find lizards in your yard or in the woods. So on the left, we have our skink again, and on the right, that Lazarus lizard. If you're looking for these guys, look in rock piles, look in decomposing wood areas, things like that. And remember, they're cold-blooded, so they like to sun themselves. Next, let's take a look at amphibians. Are the animals pictured on your screen amphibians or not? And how do you know? There's a cobra, tadpole, fish, frog, duck, seahorse, axolotl, mosquito, frog, lizard, raptor, and salamander. Well, first of all, amphibians are ectothermic or cold-blooded. That means they do not have fur, feathers, or sweat glands, just like reptiles. That would eliminate our duck and our raptor. Birds are not amphibians. Next, amphibians do have backbones. They are vertebrates. That would eliminate our mosquito. Insects are not amphibians. Next, amphibians go through what's called an incomplete metamorphosis. They start out as an egg, they turn into a larva, and eventually change into an adult. This eliminates our cobra, fish, duck, seahorse, mosquito, lizard, and raptor. Finally, amphibians do not have scales. So this means that our cobra, fish, seahorse, and lizard are not amphibians. So which ones are not amphibians? These guys, reptiles, fish, and birds and insects are not amphibians. Which ones are? The ones that are left. We have tadpoles and frogs and toads and axolotls and salamanders. These guys are all amphibians. So some fun facts about amphibians. The word amphibian comes from Greek, amphi meaning dual and bios meaning life, so 2 lives. They start out as herbivores and they turn into carnivores. The earliest amphibian discovered to date was from Scotland, dating approximately 368 million years ago. So this was 28 million years before reptiles even. There are approximately 8,300 species of amphibians worldwide on all the continents except Antarctica, and there are 38 species of amphibians native to Ohio. I mentioned incomplete metamorphosis before. That means that they start out as eggs, then they go through a larval phase, eventually turning into an adult. Compare this to a complete metamorphosis, which is what most insects go through. That has the additional stage of a pupal stage in it. So complete metamorphosis would be egg, larva, pupa, adult. Amphibians go through incomplete metamorphosis. There are 3 orders of amphibians: frogs and toads, newts and salamanders, and caecilians. We have frogs, toads, newts, and salamanders in Ohio. First, let's look at the frogs and toads. Frogs tend to have moist, relatively smooth skin, and they leap. Toads tend to have dry, warty skin, and they hop. Neither one of them will cause warts. So the bumps that appear to be warts, they're actually glands. They produce a liquid that burns the sensitive mouth tissue of other animals. So this is a defense mechanism that helps keep frogs and toads alive. If your dog has ever tried to eat a toad from your backyard, you'll know what I'm talking about, because the dog will catch the toad emits this liquid, the dog spits the toad out, and then the dog starts frothing and drooling. Almost looks like it's rabid. It's got all this yucky froth hanging out of its mouth. So that is the way that the dog's body is kind of cleansing itself of that disgusting taste, and it has now learned to stay away from frogs and toads. You may encounter frogs near water. So in our picture here, we have a bullfrog on the left, and on the right, we have a spring peeper. When you are hunting for frogs, don't just use your eyes, use your ears too. Many frogs have very distinctive calls. That spring peeper on the right is one of the very first signs that spring is right around the corner. They are really, really loud. You might run into toads on land. It's more common to find toads on land than it is to find frogs, I've found. So these are a couple of pictures of toads that I have taken on my adventures. I tend to find these guys in rocky areas. They like to hang out in the window wells of our basement. They like rocky outcroppings. You can find them in gravel driveways. It's kind of a neat thing to find those. Next, we have our newts and salamanders. There are more salamanders in North America and then in all the rest of the world together. Salamanders and newts are voiceless. They don't call like the frogs and toads do. They're kind of shy. They're primarily nocturnal, so they're active at night. Another reason that we don't see them quite as often. Most are either lungless salamanders or mole salamanders. And they are not Lizards. Salamanders are amphibians. Their eggs are laid in water, they have a larval stage, they go through that incomplete metamorphosis, and they have a smooth, slimy skin and no claws. Compare that to the reptiles that we learned about earlier, those lizards. The lizards have either lay eggs on land or they give birth to live young. They do not go through a larval stage, and they have rough, scaly skin instead, and they do have claws. You may run into salamanders in your yard. These are some eastern redback salamanders. I find these in my own yard. If you go looking around and overturn rocks, sometimes you can find these. They look almost like worms. They're about the same size as an earthworm, but they have eyes, obviously, a mouth, and legs. You may also encounter salamanders near water, especially in the late winter or early spring. The picture on the right is a vernal pool or an ephemeral pond. This is a low-lying area that only has water in it in late winter and early spring. These are imperative to the reproduction of amphibians. Mole salamanders, like the ones pictured on the left here, the spotted salamander and the Jefferson salamander, have lungs. They spend most of their life underground, just like moles do, but in those late winter, early spring, kind of unseasonably warm, very wet days, they will come above ground, seek out the ephemeral ponds or the vernal pools, mate and lay eggs, and then head back underground again. And a lot of our spring frogs, like the spring peepers and wood frogs, also will take advantage of those ephemeral ponds. This is an amazing experience. So next time we have an unseasonably warm, very wet, late winter, early spring day, consider going out to a place like Cedar Creek State Park and checking out some of those vernal pools. This is my stepdaughter Hadley in the picture. We went out earlier this year and got to see the salamander migration. We also saw lots of different frogs. It was a neat experience. Well, now that you know a little bit more about reptiles and amphibians, perhaps you would like to know how you can help them out. There are several easy things that you can do. First of all, avoid pesticides, insecticides, and herbicides. This means in your own yard, so not spraying chemicals on your grass or in your gardens. It also means by doing things like buying organic, because when they grow these vegetables on farms, if they're using chemicals, that could affect the reptiles and amphibians in the area where the farm is. So we learned earlier that amphibians can absorb things through their skin. They breathe through their skin in addition to through gills and lungs as they get older for some species. And the reptiles also are affected by pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, because think of the things that they eat. A lot of these animals eat insects. A lot of the reptiles eat vegetation. So you want to make sure that you're providing them with healthy food to eat, and you can do that by not spraying your yard. You can establish a good habitat in your yard. This can be as simple as leaving the leaves. Leave the pile of leaves there. This provides a wonderful moist habitat for insects and then for other animals that eat insects, such as reptiles and amphibians. You can install a vernal pond or an ephemeral pool in your yard. That would be a fantastic addition. Also follow the laws and guidelines. This is a common sense one that sometimes people don't think about, but don't release your pets. The red-eared slider turtles that are very common in Ohio actually are not native to the state. They are here because of the pet trade. So they used to sell little red-eared sliders in stores, and people would buy them, take them home. The turtles would start to grow. They're not a very good smelling pet. They make a lot of waste. They're kind of stinky, and so people would let them go. Unfortunately, this actually provides the animal with a really great habitat where they have been able to reproduce and reproduce and reproduce. So now we have red-eared sliders, which you can find in pretty much every drainage pond in the state because of released pets. The African dwarf frogs are another one that people buy from the pet store, decide they don't want anymore and let them go. And that's actually a bad idea because that species cannot survive here through our harsh winters. The other thing to remember with the laws and the guidelines is not to move native animals. So we learned about the turtles and how they have a very small range and how moving them from one place to another, thinking that you're being helpful, might actually really mess up their internal guidance system and make them confused and not be able to really settle in and continue to reproduce and thrive. So don't release your pets and don't release native animals or move native animals. Finally, share what you have learned. I am assuming that because you are participating in this course, you have some interest in nature. As such, you probably are the go-to person for your neighborhood or your group of friends or family. When people have questions about animals and plants, you may be the one that they go to. So share what you have learned today with your friends, neighbors, and family. And our last slide, if you have questions or comments, please give me a shout. Contact me at my email address, mothernaturesclassroom@gmail.com, or send me a text to 513-833-7360. At the bottom of the screen, you can go visit our Friends of the Warren County Park District website. You can explore our parks from the comfort of your own home, see what our parks have to offer, and plan an outing today. That is fwcpdoh.com. Thank you for joining me today for discovering nature in your own backyard with reptiles and amphibians.